Hi, everyone. Welcome to another day of Radicchio week. Today, we're going to talk about forcing techniques that you might or might not have heard of. Possibly you've seen these beautiful, I don't even know what to call them, pieces of art in nature that come from this type of process that we're going to talk about today. We're going to get right into it because we have a video that's 36 minutes long. And then we're going to be joined by 3 different farms of which you're going to see their forcing techniques. And so we're going to talk to Jason Salvo from Local Roots Farm in Washington, Brian and Mary of Wild Roots in Oregon, Brian Campbell of Uprising Seeds in Washington, and we'll also be joined by Andrea Gadina in Italy. So let's go ahead and watch the video and type in your questions if you have any, and we'll ask them after the video. Thanks.
Hi everybody, this video is an appendix to the previous video on Radicchio history, focused on forcing or whitening Radicchio. About history and origin of this particular process, it's commonly accepted that the first well-known pale yellowish sprouts of wheatloaf chicory were causally obtained by a Belgian farmer around 1870, who had observed and harvested the sprout from a stock of roots piled up in autumn and left apart during the cold season, waiting to be dried, grounded, and roasted. For what concern types that can be forced, we can mention Rosso di Treviso Tardivo, Rosa di Gorizia, or similar types like Rosa Isontina or Rosa di Istrana, and just in the past, the Variegato di Castelfranco. Now on the market, there are mainly varieties that are called self-whitening, so they already produce a head that have to be opened, that is already forced by itself due to its shape, and you can find the typical creamy yellow color inside. What concern ways of forcing, we can mention 3 ways. The most important and widely used is the water way. The second one is with sawdust in cages or boxes. In some farmers use peat or sand rather than sawdust. And the third way that is no more used, just in the past, is in the field, obtaining some bunches of plants that were tied and covered by black plastic. If we want to be focused on the most important way, so the water way, I want to mention you some key points of this process. Water have to be running water. In the Treviso area, they have some resurgence water, and it comes from the ground for free. So it's always running water, always clean. And another very important point is that it's warm and stable in terms of temperature. So 12, 14 degrees Celsius, that is something like 53, 57 Fahrenheit. Time of the process is something like 2 weeks. Due to the season can be faster. So at the beginning of the season, when the weather is warmer, it can last less than 2 weeks. But in January, February, when the season is colder, it can last more than 2 weeks. The place where the tanks are hosted have be dark, sort of dark room, no that much light, and it helps the whitening process. And when you harvest, at the end of the process, the radicchio leave 5-7 centimeters of root that have to be peeled. So to summarize the process, you have to dig the radicchio from the field with the root, clean it from the autumn leaves, and collect it in bunches or boxes or cages. You have to put the cages in tanks with running water until the neck of the plant. The water don't have to touch the leaves. You have to let the core of the radicchio grow again in this new environment, and then you can harvest your white, crunchy, bittersweet forced radicchio from the cages, and clean from autumn leaves again, and peel the root and leave 5 or 7 centimeters of the root itself that is edible and sweet as well. Thanks. Bye bye.
Hi, I'm Brian from Wild Roots Farm.
And I'm Mary.
We're here at the farm in Springdale, Oregon, and we're about to dig some Treviso tardivo. And we love Radicchio, and it's really special to us because it's a crop that is super resilient. We can grow it virtually year-round. It's delicious and adaptable, and it's one that's really close to our heart.
And it grows through the winter in Oregon without the use of any plastic, which is also a big bonus. This tardivo here was seeded in our propagation house at the end of June. And then it was transplanted about 4 weeks after that. So last week of July, beginning of August. Our spacing is about 12 inches in row between plants, and then about 12-ish also between rows. Our bed tops are about 30 inches, and we have 3 lines per bed. I feel like we could plant them a little bit closer, but we'll get a much nicer, larger forcing radicchio the bigger the plant is.
Yeah. This is a variety from Levantia Seeds that we've been enjoying for the last few weeks, bringing in successions of it, and we've used tractor mostly to undercut beds and bring in larger quantities, but it's a particularly sloppy day out here, and we'll dig a few by hand and see how they come up.
So the basic method for forcing is you're digging up an entire plant, root and all, and then bringing that into your forcing space to force it. Brian's just cleaning up all the outer icky leaves that if we brought that into our forcing environment would just rot.
So this has a pretty good heart here that will hopefully turn out into a nice head in a few weeks, and it'll go into the crate with its brothers and sisters and help cover each other up and use the energy reserves in its roots to put on new growth in the heart, and the outer leaves will blanch the heart leaves, so there's a nice white rib and deliciousness inside. So these have already been in the ground for 120 plus days at this stage, and it's about the days to maturity at the point where they recommend to dig it, and we could hope for a little bit more vigorous leaf growth on here, but it does have a nice sturdy root to sustain it in its forcing period.
So then we just When it was a lot drier out, we could just like pull these out of the soil, but now it's really muddy. Also, the undercutter of the tractor is another good way to dig a mass quantity of them. Sounds so sloppy.
Macaroni in a pot.
And these two varieties are either Dolphin or Rinaldi from Levantia.
I think this is Rinaldi. Yeah, so this is a good manageable size for us to transport, and figure a crate full of 15 or 20 Tardivo from the field will yield us maybe 6 to 10 pounds of finished product when all is said and done.
Now we're going to go into where we have been forcing our radicchios. Traditionally in Italy, they are forced in the animal stables, so we're keeping with that tradition in the old milking barn. Well, let's go inside and see.
So yeah, here we have our fancy forcing tub, our flood tray, and these two crates have been in here since October 29th, so we're up to 3 weeks here, and they got cleaned up once about a week ago because we had quite a bit of rot setting in. So now it's time to do the final round of trimming, and they'll be ready for consumption. So we've been freshening the water up every couple weeks. We have our next succession there that was harvested on November 4. So we're 2 weeks in, and in another 5 or 7 days, those will be ready for harvest as well. And we've been adding a little bit of calcium supplement to our water because I feel like that's something that we're lacking here in our spring water. This is a spring-fed water source, so it is straight out of the groundwater.
Geology is my background, and I noticed when we were in Italy that the water smelled very like limey. And then doing a little research, realizing that a lot of their soil is limestone, where they traditionally grow radicchio, so very heavy in calcium. So my sort of thought was that adding a little bit of calcium to the water would help out the plants a bit, and we also try to add a bit more calcium in the field. So then to clean these guys up, we just kind of peel back these leaves that have a bit of green. And these are going to be, they're still edible. They're going to be a little bit bitter. Kind of the point of forcing is to get radicchio that is a lot sweeter and not bitter at all, because it grows in the dark. But basically, when you get to this part and you have these beautiful all white ribs, they're going to be incredibly sweet and juicy.
And you must have a Tardivo knife sourced directly from Treviso, or else you're going to fail. And there's your squid.
So after they are put into the soil, they will be in here for about 3-ish weeks. And we make sure to wet the soil a lot so that it's pretty moist. And as in the dark as possible with some good airflow. Yeah, so leave them in the soil and they'll start to form really beautiful new white hearts. I feel like this was done, these were pulled a little bit earlier. Traditionally, it's done in like January, February, when the plants have gotten a little bit bigger in the field. And that if you do it a little bit later in the season, you're going to get a much better result. But once you do this, clean up the same root.
And what would be the next step is probably to just give them a little bath in some warmish water so that they will open up more. Like, I'm kind of manhandling this one.
The leaves like curl open. So then you have your little rose.
Emphasis on little.
Yeah, so there's this pink variety. There's all green.
Or yellow, kind of Reno
Yellow.
type.
These are, this one's from Levantia, as well as a speckled variety, which isn't commercially available, but there are people working on breeding it. So, yeah.
It's a labor of love.
Hi, I'm Jason Salvo. I own Local Roots Farm in Duval, Washington. We're here about 30 minutes east of Seattle, and I'm standing in my beautiful patch of Treviso tardivo, which we're going to talk about forcing this beautiful, amazing plant today. And what I'd like to do is dig up a plant, and we can talk about what it is and why it does what it does. So here is a lovely specimen that we picked out. It is November. So there's a lot of soil on the roots, but here we have a good example of what it looks like in the field. You can see that it's not very blanched on the inside. I just wiped dirt on my face. And here's the roots. We transplant these. If we had direct seeded them, you'd have a beautiful long taproot, which would be the optimal way to do it. But because direct seeding things is sometimes kind of hard, we transplant them, and it works just fine with from a transplant. And so what you have here is a plant that basically at this time of year, this is been a pretty mild fall, but in general, it goes dormant in the winter. And if we left these, the outer leaves that are already kind of starting to die would start to rot and die, and the inner leaves would stay alive, but they wouldn't be grown. And so what is forcing? Forcing is the act of taking a plant with its roots that's essentially gone dormant for the winter, and you bring it into a warm environment and it regrows. It's kind of like sometimes you leave your carrots in the refrigerator and the tops start growing again. Exact same concept, only if you left the carrot out on the counter, those tops would grow a lot faster. And if you took that carrot and you put it in a warm closet where it was totally dark, because it's not getting any light, that carrot top would turn white there because the chlorophyll isn't interacting with light to turn it green. So that's basically what forcing is. And so what we do is we dig up a bunch of these. We tear off the nasty outer leaves, because what does happen a lot in forcing is rot, because you basically are creating this artificial environment. And I think you're sort of solving for a couple of different variables, one of which is temperature, one of which is how much light there is, and the other one is airflow. So when we went and visited a bunch of farms in Italy, we saw a lot of them were bringing them into greenhouses that had like a shade cloth over the top, so they were dark-ish, but not especially dark. Flowing water that came from these amazing springs that are in the Veneto. And then the water is warm enough to provide like enough stimulation that the plants, after going through a couple frosts and they are like, oh, it's wintertime, we're gonna go to sleep. And they're like, oh, it's warm, we're gonna start growing again. They're totally, they take a whole bunch of them, they're squeezed together. So the leaves, the outer leaves, end up, I think, forming, like doing the darkening. So then what grows on the inside is perfectly, basically you can see the green-ish color in these ribs as you go into the inner ones where it's already darker naturally, they're a little bit whiter, but when you force them in a dark environment, they're very white, and their texture also changes. They become a lot crunchier, which is one of the like defining characteristics of Treviso tardivo, is its lovely crunchy leaf. All right, here we are at our very fancy forcing chamber, which is just an old walk-in cooler that we don't use anymore so much. And I set the thermostat to like 50 degrees. It's got a fan, so there's some airflow, so it limits the amount of like rot that happens. And then it's totally dark. And so what I'm going to do is we haven't actually started forcing much this year, so I picked a bunch of stuff a couple weeks ago. These have probably been in here for like 3 weeks. And we'll see what they look like, and we'll clean them up. All right, so here's the big reveal. It's warm in here. Okay, so we're gonna cut into these. I think I probably should have started doing this like a week ago, because a lot of these are not as happy as they might have been. I think I left them for too long. Thanksgiving, got in the way. So I'm just peeling off the like outer leaves, and then what you do is drip tape sheath, sort of cut away at the root. It should look like a sort of three-dimensional trapezoid. Ooh, got a hollow root here. Oh, wow, it's totally hollow. Look at that. That's unusual. And so here we have the final result. Really nice. I left it too long. I'm sure those of you that do this out there in Radicchio land are like, Jason, that one sucks. But there we go. What's cool, this one, because it had that hollow root, we didn't get to really look at how, talk about the roots, but you usually leave a fairly long root on it. I think it's delicious. When we grill them, I'll leave the root on, and it's kind of my favorite part. It's just an unusual kind of like a little bit of astringent, bitter, rootiness, which is unlike other roots that we sometimes see. Okay, so because we haven't really started our like forcing production, this is a little bit ad hoc, but I grabbed a couple of other things to try and force, which we did the same process with. These didn't come out so great, but this is the beautiful Rosa di Gorizia, which are typically they're forced in sand instead of water, but I just grabbed a couple of them and put them in water because why not? It's basically, I think, the medium. I mean, I guess if you're a stickler for a tradition, then maybe the medium's important, but ultimately, I don't think the medium matters that much. What you're really doing is you're taking a biennial, a plant that is like, okay, I've gone dormant for the winter, I'm getting ready to regrow when the spring comes, and you're like tricking it into growing earlier than it otherwise would if you were left it outside. And so in this case, we stuck these in water too. This one's okay. And so, I think there are a lot of different media that people use to force stuff. They'll use water. They'll just leave them. Like I know some growers just harvest them into a tote, and with the dirt on the root, just stick the tote in a corner, and they do their thing. They've got a little bit of moisture in the soil that's around their roots. And, once they're exposed to that warmer temperature, they start regrowing. And if it's in the dark, you get these much like nicer, the like more contrast between the colors. And then the other thing I did, and I don't think this worked super well, but I grabbed some dandelion. These are kind of pretty. Like I said, I left them a bit too long, but so this is like just green. It's actually Catalonia chicory. So it's not real dandelion, which is Taraxacum something. But this is the chicory that everybody calls dandelion. And inspired by Brian up at Uprising Seeds, I picked some of these and put it in, and that's pretty cool too, right? So these were totally green leaves when I brought them in there, and now all that new growth has no chlorophyll, so it's all white, and they're quite pretty. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is like different media that we've used and like different methods that we've done. So we've done everything from like we've got these simple tubs that we can sort of put, I don't know, 30 plants in together. I've got these big like 4x8 foot plywood things with a rim that we line with plastic that we filled with water and put totes in, kind of like what you saw Brian and Mary doing, but really a janky version of that. And we've tried sand. One year, actually, ironically, one of the most successful years we had is we were having a flood. We picked everything into macro bins and our cooler was full, so we just had macro bins sitting on a trailer with a tarp over them. And when I finally got around to like dealing with them, they were all really nice. You know, it's one of these things where you're like, I think sometimes it's easy to overthink it and do a really complicated thing, but it's like the plant wants to grow. It wants to, it's going to do it whether you like it or not, really. So it's like you can make a better environment for it, but it will do its thing even in a closet in your house or whatever. Just wants dark and warm.
Hi, so I'm Brian from Uprising Seeds, and I'm up at our home farm in Linden right now. We're about 3 miles south of the border with BC, up in the northwest corner of Washington. And we wanted to show you some new setups we're producing some forced chicories with this year. The Treviso Tardivo, which we're doing in our greenhouse now, and some Gorizia Isantina style Radicchio that we're doing in a root cellar here on the farm. So we'll have a look in the greenhouse first, and you'll have to forgive the selfie / point of view video. Lane and Sean were supposed to come up this week, but because of the new restrictions, we're having to do it ourselves. So I'm going to turn this around and we'll go walk into the greenhouse and have a look. So one of the things that has inspired us a lot from what we've seen from friends' recent trips to northern Italy is that a lot of the smaller farms are really using pretty simple setups to produce a really high quality product. A lot of the wholesale farms, of course, have real slick concrete lagoons. Wow, it just started pouring. Some concrete lagoons with circulating water, and this is kind of our small scale home version of that, so we can take a walk to the end and see what we've got going on. This all came together in about an hour with material on hand, and has a capacity probably of maybe 16 to 20 bulb crates at a time, and it'd be real easy to stack a couple of these along the length of the greenhouse, which is otherwise empty this time of year. So this is just a couple of pallets with a 2x6 frame built on top of it and a water impermeable tarp draped over that and filled with water to make a lagoon. And then, like most setups that force in water with the Tardivo, these are just bulb crates with the plants pulled with the roots still attached and washed, and then sitting in the bulb crates in the lagoon. And the water obviously you want to keep on the roots and out of the crowns, so I'd say, you know, 2-3 inches of water, just making sure that the roots are staying in there. And we've got bulb crates, we've got a couple of milk crates, just kind of whatever we have on hand that'll keep the plants upright. We've seen some setups like this where farmers rely on just packing in the plants really tight, especially if you've got nice big leafy plants out in the field, and then they'll naturally blanch the interiors just because the light won't kind of penetrate down to where the new growth is happening. This is pretty dense in here. We did put up a shade cloth over this just to bring down the light levels a little bit, but we can walk over here and throw that up and see what's happening. We generally force a couple crates a week. We'll dig up and put in here just so we have a pretty constant supply coming out. Sorry about the video work. And so the oldest in here have only been in here maybe 10 days or a little less. And I'll find one here. So we can look and see what's going on. Doesn't look like much on the outside, but you can see the inside is starting to fill in pretty nicely with the real classic growth. Nice white stems. Not seeing too much green in there, so seems like it's doing its job of keeping the light out and getting that nice, beautiful blanch on the inside. So this was really easy. We didn't buy anything for this. The only maintenance it really requires is having a sump pump or bailing the water out once a week and refilling it. And this way, probably if we're using it to its fullest on a 3-week cycle, we could probably be producing 30-40 pounds a week out of this, I would think fairly easily. So one part of our forcing operation happens in this building. We're really fortunate that the farm we lease came with the old farmstead root cellar that we have access to, and it makes a perfect spot to do some forcing. So this space is probably about 10 by 15-ish. Pretty consistent temperature, around 50 degrees this time of year. And it's where we do a lot of our early Tardivo forcing when it's still too warm outside in the greenhouse to do it there. And while there are some disadvantages in that there's not really access to plumbing, or we're below grade, so it's not easy to drain water out of here. Since we are forcing the Tardivo purely in water, not in any solid medium, it does involve carrying bins out and draining them out into the grass and then refilling them a couple times, which isn't too much trouble on the scale that we do it at. It would be probably pretty easy to set up a sump pump if you went so far as to create a lagoon in a space like this instead of using the buckets. But for our small scale, the buckets work great. So here is basically what we're using. Pretty shallow plastic tubs. We've got about, it's hard to see, about 2 inches of water in there so that the roots are fairly well saturated, but obviously not so high that it's up into the crowns. You can see there's quite a bit of rot, and I think that's due to the lack of really good circulation in here. But although the tops look pretty rough, generally we found that it doesn't really affect the cores, and we're still getting these beautiful pristine cores in here. I think it reduces the amount of time that we're able to force them in this space with the poor circulation and with it being challenging to get water in and out, but it does the trick. And we had at one point pretty much the whole floor space in here devoted to Tardivo, and this is probably the last round we'll do in here because we've got the rest of it going in the greenhouse now. You can see we're also doing a little bit of Belgian endive in here in similar totes, and we've got several bins of roots stored here of the endive, and that's something we work with both for selections for seeds, and we like to produce it a little bit, mostly just for personal use. We sell a little bit. The other type that we do a lot of forcing with, and one we're particularly fond of, is the Rosa Icentina, or a type traditional to Grizia, Rosa Grizia. And when they're trimmed back and brought into the forcing room and forced in a soil or peat or sand or something like that, they create these beautiful rosettes shaped like roses. You can see we do get some tip burn occasionally, and since we're doing genetic work on those, that's something that can be a selection criterion. But for the most part, we get pretty good success with these. They're a lot of work for a pretty light final product, so it's difficult to think about doing these on scale except as a project of passion, but we definitely have the passion for them, so we really love producing them. This has been in for about a week, a little bit less, and our next round of this going. We've got a beautiful diversity of colors and patternings, and there's still a diverse enough population that you see quite a bit of different phenotypes of shape and whatnot as well. So plenty of opportunity to steer these in different directions, color-wise, leaf pattern-wise, shape-wise, and that's something that we're enjoying playing with quite a bit. So, more look into there. Beautiful cores. The darkness in the root cellar makes for really nice white stems in the cores of these. So that's one of the benefits of having them forcing in essentially pitch darkness. So yeah.
Okay, guys, that was great. We have all the farmers here with us right now, and they're going to hop on. They're going to turn their cameras on, and we're going to ask questions to them. You can type your questions into YouTube. But before, we just have like one question right now. I wrote down a ton of questions I have, but I wanted Andrea to he's from Italy. He's a Radicchio breeder. He presented on Monday, gave us the history of Radicchio in general, and then talked about forcing as well, because this was something that was a lot of questions came up when we did Rad TV around forcing. And I know people are interested in trying to figure out how, farmers mostly, but then just like home gardeners are asking, like, how do I do this in my basement? But I just wanted to get your impression, Andrea, from being someone who lives in Italy, that is, the proper traditional way to do this. What do you think about what you just saw and what we're trying to do here, and how all these farmers are getting to the results that they're getting to? And do you have questions for them? And if you do have questions, if you can just say the name of the person you have a question for first.
Ciao a tutti. Hi, everybody. My impressions are that you learned how to do that. So really good work. I had first contact. Can you hear me? Okay. I had first contacts 10 years ago with US growers that were fascinated by Tardivo, but they didn't know at all how to grow it. And the crazy thing that they cutted the top of the plant, and they worked as Belgian endive, so using just the root. And it's wrong. You have to maintain to keep the whole plant. And what I saw in the videos today is amazing, because you are doing a great job and the results are excellent for me. You know a lot of things on this special crop.
Great. If any of the speakers have anything to ask Andrea, let me know. I am going to read this one. And I also want to mention that Andrea is going to leave in about 20 minutes. So I want to try to get the questions that we have for him specifically, which I think we have a lot because we want to hear about the Italian perspective. Someone who's is a Belgium grower, a farmer that grows lots of whitloaf, Belgium endive, and said that they've here it's always done covered with soil to keep the new heads compact. Do you ever force in Italy this way? With the plants covered in soil?
I guess that making them so tight in the box well, now we are using boxes, but in the past they were just benches tied very tight, very close each plant to the other. And I guess that this makes the same function than covering them with the ground. In the past, the first Chioggia type that was bred, I mean, at the beginning of the, let's say, breeding of Chioggia 70 years ago, the red round type wasn't round. There were just some loose leaves, like a wild plant, and it was extremely late in terms of cycle, so suitable for February harvesting. And to obtain a sort of head, a very small ball, they put some ground on the loose leaves, and with the heavy of the ground on the plant, the plant was obliged to embrace the leaves and to form a sort of head. So I guess that this type of situation, both in Belgian endive, in common type like Chioggia, and in Tardivo as well, so some pressure on the head can cause the forming of the head. So we don't do that with Tardivo. We did that in the past with Chioggia, but it makes totally sense for me.
Jason mentioned in his video about transplanting and talked about if he did, direct seed, having like a longer taproot. Is it typically transplanted or direct seeded in Italy?
I guess that both techniques are used, but seed is something that is really precious. So you don't want to lose it, and you need a lot when you do a direct seed. So transplanting is maybe widely used nowadays, but the quality of the taproot you can get by direct seed, you never get something similar by transplanting. And for a so difficult process for the plant, like forcing, maybe you can obtain excellent result with a plant that comes from direct seed, mainly for very long cycles. And it would help also for, how to say, afford the winter in the proper time, because a plant that comes from direct seed in all types, but in Tardivo as well, can afford the winter easier, because due to the quality of the taproot and also the quality of the leaves.
Great. Someone is asking, and this question comes up a lot, about your opinion on the difference between forcing in sand versus water. This person's asking specifically for the Isontina Galizia types that are usually done in sand, that you said, I believe. But what's your opinion of the difference?
I would do that just in water, and because it's a magic ingredient for the process. And I'm talking about the water that they have in Treviso, that it's warm, it comes from the ground, not from the river or something like that. And it's a stable temperature, and it's sort of warm during the winter where you are below 0 Celsius. And well, it's the main ingredient, I said, for the process. Yeah, you can do something similar with some tricks, but yeah, this is really specific from that area. For what concern Isontina or Gorizia, there are a lot of growers from Treviso that now are growing it, and they use the same technique that they use for Tardivo, but even it's maybe less easy. I saw the best results in sawdust. So forcing Gorizia type in sawdust, moist sawdust, put in boxes, and then the boxes in the, you have to collect them in the warehouse. So the temperature of the environment where you host the boxes have to be something like 10 Celsius to 15. So again, a warm environment. So same concept that Jason explained very well, of putting the plant that was dormant in an environment that could wake it up.
So one thing that go ahead, did you have more?
No, I said that I saw the best results in terms of appearance. So a longer trumpet and better color for me. But well, the growers from the Treviso area are doing a great job in water as well.
One thing we talk about a lot here is how do you make any money growing? It takes so much time and effort. You know, and here in the US don't have much of a market for this. It's pretty specialty. So I can understand that like Treviso Tardivo would be, you know, has a big market in Italy. But like especially the Rosa di Gorizia and Isontina types, or I think Brian said it, they're so small, they're so light. You know, how is it? I think it's kind of a mystery to me that people make money off this. And there's also, I guess I've wondered if there's like a subsidies for people to grow things in Italy that have cultural heritage or anything, or is it what? Okay.
There is for sure part of the reason of that is that, correct, it's heritage, and they don't want to stop, even it's sometimes is not money efficient. So yeah, costs are higher than production costs. Gorizia is something really a niche market, and they well, a perfect plant should well, an old grower told me that a perfect plant should weigh 30 grams, and second choice is consider bigger plants, could be 60 grams. That is still nothing, you know. So it's something that well, it's really, really particular. And so first choice is so first quality is should be paid 15 euro per kilo, and second choice from 10 to 12. But yeah, the costs are really high. So yeah, it looks like it couldn't work, but yeah, maybe for Tardivo there is more market, and also the balance between cost, price, and production in a sort of a way it works.
Yeah.
But if you have a look at the process, you have to harvest it 2 times. So plus all the structures and the work, the water, all this thing, and growing also the field, you have to harvest it 2 times, and harvesting is an important voice in terms of costs usually. So yeah, your doubts are really existing.
Yeah, nobody here is doing it for the money.
Just to put that into perspective too, those prices Andre just quoted work out to less per pound than you pay for 30 days to maturity baby salad mix from Salinas Valley. So I think it justifies a high price considering the work that goes into it.
We got a question from a grower in British Columbia in Canada that says, I'm curious what Tardivo sells for per pound in Italy, and as well as, and how about for you guys in Washington and Oregon, because they're trying to figure out how to price it in Canada.
So I saw it yesterday at the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I don't know the price that is paid to the grower.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, at the supermarket, it was from 4 to 5 euro per kilo. So $2.5 to $2.5 per pound, something like that. No, Jason, is it correct, the cost?
No, your math is right. I was shaking my head.
Okay. Okay.
We charge anywhere from $12 to $16 a pound. So that would be like 32 per kilo.
Yeah. And it covers your costs? Neither covers the cost. Okay.
You know, it's hard to tell. I think that it probably does. We don't do the most fastidious job with our growing or our forcing, in part because it seems like a lot of times it does a lot of the work for us, but it definitely is pretty fussy, and we do charge a lot more for it than other things because of that. Brian and Mary,
sorry.
Yeah, we charge about
15.
Sorry, Andre, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we charge about 15 a pound, and on a small scale, I don't think we're making money on it either, but I do think that there's something to be said for economy of scale. If you are spending a little more attention on it and doing it at scale, you could certainly make at least a little bit on it.
And from my limited research, it seems like in Italy, their subsidies from the government to farmers is about 2 times what it is in the United States. And it does seem like it goes to those like culturally, those older crops to keep that tradition alive. I don't know if that's how they are able to charge less, but it might be a factor.
Chandler wrote in and shared that they sell theirs for $10 to $12 a pound in Eastern Washington. I keep thinking about all this work that goes into it, and then I think about how the focus so much is on making it very sweet and very crunchy. And then I think about how you see it cooked so often. It kind of feels like it would be better just to eat it raw, right? So that you can experience that crunchiness and sweetness. But I just had some that was in a salad mix from Wild Roots Farm yesterday, and it was fantastic and crunchy. But I don't know, just something I wanted to say there. But I mean, I know that we see chorizo tardivo cooked often in lots of dishes. It kind of seems like half and half, maybe raw versus cooked. What about the Grizia and the Isontina types? Are those also cooked? I've only eaten those raw as a salad, like completely by itself or kind of as a decorative thing.
They are so precious that it's a pity to cook them. But for example, in Treviso area, they just use and consume the tardivo because they have it as a regular type in that area, so they don't eat the others. I consume that. I don't consume raw radicchio, and the only one I get raw is the tardivo and the gorizia and the castelfranco, and the other one. And I cook only the other one, so the chioggia so all the types can be used both cooked and raw, but you can experience maybe the particular or taste that used to the forcing process raw. By the way, even if you cook it, it maintains some differences from the others that are more similar if cooked. So I'm talking about the red types. So Chioggia Verona and Treviso Precoce are similar if cooked, and if you cook the Tardivo is still different.
We had it in a really interesting way that was similar to what Kathy showed us yesterday when we were in Padua, when we went to dinner. And you remember we had the Tardivo that was kind of like quick pickled, kind of marinated octopus.
Yeah.
Picture of it last night. I'll post it, but that was really fantastic. Was that prepared? I don't know if you watched Kathy's, but was it prepared similar where she boiled some water and white wine vinegar and some salt, and then she just kind of put it in the pan just very briefly, turned or just cooked a little bit and then brought it out and cooled it and then just ate it. She just eats it with hard-boiled egg crumbled on top.
Okay. Yes. That way to boil it just for a while with water and some vinegar inside is pretty used. Also to sometimes you can prepare some cans and maintain. I don't know. In Italy, the word is under oil. So you put the oil inside to maintain it.
Preserve it in oil.
Reserve, yeah. And it's just to disinfect the plant, and you can keep it for a month. It's great.
Somebody is asking about, same farmer from Belgium is asking a question about Castelfranco. I have a variety that is good in the field in the fall. Is it a different variety is there a different variety for forcing? Can the Radicchio first produce in the field and then again with forcing? I'm not sure what that question is. If that makes sense to anybody.
Can you repeat it, please?
I think I understand the question, Lane. I guess I'm not an expert on this in particular, but that's something that we have done. We've taken a whole bunch of different varieties, Castelfranco, Verona. We've taken some of the Rosa di Verona, the pink ones, and we've brought them inside to force just to see what happens. And they all do really nice, pretty, like, continued growth when you do that. So yes, because they're all ultimately the same plant, Chicorium intybus.
Mhm. And then the Castelfranco was one that used to be forced, right? And now it's like self-whitening. You would bring it in to make it more tender and white. Oh, so they're asking about cutting it first. So she said, like lettuce, keep it growing after you cut it. So she's talking about growing Castelfranco in the field, cutting it, and then bringing it in and then forcing it.
The root without the head, you mean?
Take off the head, but keep like the basal plate, the root and the basal plate there, and then let it regrow.
This Belgian grower did that?
No, she's asking, can you do that?
Oh, it's something, well, I never heard. Well, I heard about that just about Tardivo because Northern Europe growers that are expert with Belgian endive, so also Dutch growers do that, and some French growers do that. They wanted to use the Wittloff chamber to grow some Tardivo, and in the past I made some experiment and it works, but you have to leave the head. You can't cut it. Otherwise you will experience a plant with larger leaves, similar to Precoce, and very short gem. So you can use the Wittloff chamber, but without cutting the head from the root.
Andrea, I want to make sure you're okay because I know you have dinner.
No, you can go ahead. I have some more time. No problem.
Someone is asking if there's no money to be made, American farmers, and there's no market, why are you doing it?
This is a question for US growers.
Right. So I will ask Jason first. What do you think, Jason?
Well, I guess because it seems like, for one, maybe there's money to be made, but that's ultimately not why. I'm sure somebody could make money doing it. But no, it's fun. I mean, it's interesting, it's unusual, it's delicious, and it's like, if you don't have a passion project, like why are you doing what you're doing? And I guess, that's what it's really about, is that it's interesting and it's unusual, and like, we can go out and grow acres of lettuce and carrots and that's fine, but they're not that exciting. So, it's like you always want to like find what's fun and new and interesting. And then I guess on top of that, a lot of people are, sort of anti-bitter. I love the bitter. I'm like, the more bitter the flavor, the better. I don't necessarily like the things that are, I mean, even like Tardivo is great, but it's mild. I'd much rather eat something that comes out of the field and has a stronger, more bitter flavor. And so I guess, ultimately it's finding that other flavor profile that isn't often found in American food, plus just kind of the like fun of doing something unique.
And it's agriculture, right? Like it's about creating culture around food and creating culture around growing beautiful things to eat in the community that comes from that. So like Jason said, we have to have our projects of passion, and for me there's just nothing more beautiful, nothing more seasonal, and the community we've created around it is something really precious that we've all made lasting friendships through this crop, and it's connected so many of us together. So I mean, I think that's the reward in itself.
Mary and Brian?
Yeah, I think that Jason and Brian covered it, but it's just really cool to like dig something out, stick it somewhere for 3 weeks, and then it just grows this beautiful new super white against the red crop that's super delicious. And really juicy. Yeah, much different texture than anything that comes out of the field. It's fun to slip it in our CSA members' winter boxes occasionally, just as a nice little surprise. Brian, yeah.
Yeah, all that. And what better time for passion project than end of fall or winter, when maybe we find a little more time as active production farmers.
Yeah, it is something that's really beautiful, like in the middle of winter, you know, where a lot of times we eat a lot of, I guess, dark green, but also brown things. To have something that's like a splash of color is really cool. Well, I was talking to Andrea on Monday, and we were talking about the Rosa types, the pink types that in his area are not like really that popular, but that people do eat and buy during the holiday time. And it's like a festive thing during the holidays that people will indulge in. Somebody just asked the same question I was about to ask. There's a lot of people that are just gardeners that, I mean, I have radicchio in my yard right now, and it's like, we're thinking about like digging some up and doing this. Do any of you guys have advice? You know, I just tell people it's because I've seen people like Alex Wenger and other folks in the East Coast of the United States that just like stick it in a bucket and put it in the basement and just see what happens. You know, is there any advice that anybody's got to say about how home gardeners? This person is saying she's a home gardener with a small house, no basement, with a hoop house covered with black plastic sheeting. Generate enough warmth in the Pacific Northwest to pull off forcing, but then also just like folks that do have a basement that they can just stick it down there. Any advice for like kind of home gardeners or much smaller scale farmers?
The most important thing that I would suggest to a hobby gardener, so non-professional, that he can not put that much attention on all the things that a professional grower do, but the only thing that need to respect is the transplanting date. This is the most important thing for me. If he respect the transplanting date, everything will comes easier. So even if he doesn't have any information about fertilizer, irrigation, disease control, insects control, everything can work in a good way if the transplanting date is correct. So not that early that the plants risk to come too big and you will experience a lot of bolting, not too late, and as it won't grow, you will. Well, if you go too late, the plant will stay almost at the same size of transplanting for the most of the season. And then when springs come, it will bolt. So that's the story.
So if someone were to transplant, you know, here, like I think about mine, I'm in Oregon, I'm similar to where these guys are. I transplanted mine, Radicchio, in the middle of August. It was seeded in the middle of July. It's out there growing, it's looking pretty good. Can I take it out right now and uproot it right now, bring it into my basement, put it in a warm area, put it in the bucket and let it go and see what happens?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
I guess that mid of August is the last date for you, correct? No, not later, or it's already a little bit late.
It's okay. When we did our trials, hopefully.
Okay.
We seed ours. We seed them. We sow them on the solstice, June 21st, and we transplant a month later, July 21st. And we're the same latitude as Seattle. We're just 30 minutes east of Seattle. So, yeah.
I'd say if you get that part of it right, like Andrea said, like this is what the plants want to do. I've been forcing for a decade in closets in my parents' basement still. I did production Belgian endive in the crawl space under a mother-in-law that we rented. Any place that's dark. I mean, we've done it at 40 degrees, 50 degrees, 70-degree room temperature. Really, the only thing you're going to see in terms of difference is how long it takes to make the secondary growth based on temperature. And as long as you keep, as long as you water them in well, I mean, we've done it where we haven't even checked in on them for, 15, 20 days, and just like don't even peek at them and come back and they, form beautiful heads of Isantino. So it's really like, definitely if you're doing it commercially, you want to dial in some of the variables, but on a home scale, just for a kitchen gardener, it's really like so easy to experiment with, and the only thing you need is a dark space and a container to force it in.
Yes, I encourage people watching to do it and post it on Instagram, and let's see your results. It'd be great. I have two questions I want to ask if you have time before we go. So one's from Chandler over at our fellow Radicchio friend in the east side of Washington that says, does anybody know where to source metal frame cages for commercial forcing like the ones in Italy? Our crates are not tall enough to keep the leaves upright, so we get short, stubby Tardivo. No? You're saying no, Chandler.
Chandler, you want to organize a group buy on that?
Ooh, yeah.
Milk crates aren't as big, but they're quite a bit taller.
Mm-hmm. Milk crates.
Sounds like you need a fabricator to weld you some up, Chandler.
Okay, and then Davide, our friend who was on Tuesday with his grandparents, says, I would think that growing new stuff like Radicchio in your context might create customer and community interest around the farm. Is that the case for you guys? Like, are you getting more customers maybe that get sucked in with the Radicchio possibly? Or
that's a hard question to answer. I think I think our like restaurant accounts, I don't know if they got sucked in, but they certainly have. We've developed those relationships a lot over things like Radicchio and specialty things, because I think that's how restaurants set them apart. Our CSA members, I think we've kind of had to force Radicchio onto them. No pun intended, I guess. But I think that over the years, I think it's the unusual stuff and the kind of like pushing their eating boundaries that does keep them coming back, or at least the ones that aren't totally put off by bitter greens.
mm-hmm.
So our market is seeds, and I think we've totally seen that attract people to our work, and I think people are so captivated by all the beautiful pictures they see, especially of the forest things. Like, for example, our Rosa Isantino was our best-selling Radicchio last year, which is, probably the most specialty one we sell. So I think it's definitely attracted people to us.
Brian and Mary?
Yeah, we've definitely attracted certain new clientele and built relationships on Radicchio, like Jason mentioned, and I think that's one of the intangibles of why we grow a crop that we're losing money on in the case of the specialty forcing types, where it is unique and it's hard to put a value on that significance and relationships that stem out of it.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all the work that you guys put into making videos of your farms and the way that you do forcing and sharing it with everyone here today, because there's been so much interest that people want to know how to do that themselves. And it's largely a mystery. I think we've talked about this with Andrea before. When we don't have Italians to talk to about this, it's really hard to find all this information. And thankfully, we've got people working on it now, and Jason is and Syria put together the Radicchio zine, and they can read Italian, so they can read books like this one that I have here. I can buy the books and they can come to my house and read it to me. And, we, together we can learn a lot about this and then spread it on to more folks that will grow it, hopefully, in the United States, and really just get it on people's radars more. I think that we're seeing a lot of that. We see a lot of pictures on social media, and people are becoming more and more interested in eating these beautiful vegetables that we're all really taken by and feel so passionate about. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Andrea, to spend so much effort in sharing information that we have a hard time accessing without you. Thank you so much, everyone. This will be recorded. It's going to be on YouTube. So people will come back hopefully and watch it that weren't able to tune in today. And I look forward to seeing you guys when we can. Oh, hold on. One last thing. Where are U.S. farmers buying their Radicchio seed? Oh, curious that you ask. Well, there's a few places you can buy Radicchio seed. And one of those places is right here on two people. Yes. Well, a collaboration that's happening. And behind Andrea, you can see that there's this image that's a little bit hard to see right now, but it is an image for the Gusto Italiano project. And it's a collaborative project between Smarties.bio, which is Andrea's company, Brian at Uprising, and Culinary Breeding Network, to bring Andrea's seed, which is totally fantastic, from Italy to the US, that can be purchased through Uprising Seeds this year in early 2021. So you'll be able to see a lot of Radicchio from Andrea, which is great quality, as well as some brassicas that he's working on, maintaining these really lovely heritage brassicas that are in Italy that we don't have here. And actually everyone on this call has been growing some of those things and pretty excited about them. So we're really excited to have access to that. Do you guys want to add anything? Okay, grow Radicchio, guys. Force Radicchio. I'm going to go out today. I'm going to get it out of my yard. I'm going to put it in the basement. I'm going to post about it. We'll see how I do. Okay, thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Ciao.